Hi, this is Josh from Grapplezilla, and today we're going to talk about why is Dagestani wrestling so effective. And I'm going to talk about, first of all, because Dagestani wrestling is great, or you say Dagestani. And after my last video about what makes Russian wrestling so great as well, my Dagestani friends who I wrestle with, they actually told me, listen, man, you got to talk about Dagestan. So I was like, okay, he's right. So first, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. Also, if you see me tick, I got Tourette syndrome, so I have tics, so no worry. So let's get to it. Dagestan, before we talk about the wrestling, you have to understand the area of the world that Dagestan comes from. It's a small republic in Russia. It has about 3.1 million people, right? It lies on the western shore of the Caspian Sea, and is part of the Caucasus region, okay? Mountain region, most people live in rural areas, and basically the Caucasus has always been a crossroads of major civilizations, okay? And historical superpowers, such as like Persians, Ottomans, Arabs have been there, the Mongolians, the Russian Empire, etc. So it's been a really rough area of the world, and a lot of times being invaded, etc. So in their blood, Dagestanis are very fighters, like they're fighting blood to the core, right? A tough neighborhood. It's a tough neighborhood, okay? Now, and on top of this, the Caucasus region is very, very, very ethnically diverse, right? With actually most of these countries around it and republics producing amazing wrestling talent, as well as having a lot of cultural wrestling styles. Many of them influenced by Turkic wrestling styles as well. So just to give you an example, right near Dagestan, you have, for example, republics like Ossetia, Ingushetia, Abkhazia, and Chechnya, all producing amazing talent. And then you got top tier wrestling countries like Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. And if you look at the big picture, you have like, Russia is a wrestling country as well, that's with non-Caucasus region wrestling as well. Generally it's in Greco, but we're going to talk more about freestyle wrestling here. As well as we have Iran and Turkey in the area. So I mean, talk about a wrestling neighborhood, right? And all this together, all these little cultures that produce great wrestlers, right? So what makes Dagestani wrestling so good? Okay, like why are these guys dominating? Why do they produce such great wrestlers? What's happening there that this little country, this little republic, it's not a country, republic is just producing top tier wrestling talent that's dominating? And of the Russian wrestling, national wrestling team, especially the freestyle, a large percentage are Dagestani. And if not Dagestani, they're Ossetian, etc. Okay? So I think first you have to understand that, as we've spoken in the history, fighting is definitely part of life in Dagestan. And pretty much every Dagestani kid will enroll into some type of fighting art. And most of the times it's going to be wrestling, right? For example, the capital city of the Republic of Dagestan is Makhachkala. And just in Makhachkala, which is not a huge city, I think it's like 250, 350,000 people, maybe even less, there's 50,000 competitive wrestlers, okay? Like, it's insane. And we're talking about top tier competitive wrestlers. And with that kind of, that's just Makhachkala, with that kind of amount of wrestlers, it's easy to see how the wrestling program is going to be optimized for full success, right? And the way to get success, I mean, these guys are all physical beasts, but it's going to be technical prowess. And Dagestan is extremely technical. I would say the most technical wrestling in the world, with probably, I would say, Ossetia being second, and in my opinion, Georgia, very technical as well. And being that they're so technical, and for example, they're amazing counter wrestlers. The clinch work and hand fighting is very, very good, right? They're very good at throwing on top of grabbing legs and going for single legs, double legs, etc., setting it up, but the throws are great. And their parterre is much more developed to freestyle wrestling than, for example, the U.S. parterre, which the U.S. has great parterre, but it's definitely made for folk style. And then someone that's done folk style for maybe 10, 12 years now has to go to freestyle. And because of the rule change, the point changing, it can have an effect. Well, in Dagestan, they're working on freestyle wrestling all the time, and they're very good, as we've seen in the past with a lot of Dagestanis beating top wrestlers on the ground on parterre. Dagestanis are masters of counter wrestling, circular movement. A lot of stuff's in circular movement. Unbelievable scrambling ability, blocking their legs, etc. Very good at controlling legs, and the hand fighting skills are just absolutely amazing. Their conditioning is very different from hey, let's lift hard, let's lift a lot of weights, buddy, as hard as we can. Now they do lift weights for sure, but their conditioning is very plyometric based, okay? Focusing a lot on wrestling movements, very functional, everything's functional. Posterior chain development is unbelievable, okay? A lot of times you see Dagestani wrestlers, and a lot of them look not like this big bodybuilder type that you'd see in like a Kyle Snyder or a Cuban wrestler. But, I mean, some do, of course, but for example, Gadasov, he was a physical monster. But usually they don't look like that, but their posterior chain is completely developed, 100%, right? They're very flexible, and they work on a lot of exercises that work the transverse plane of movement and specific lifts that would probably be seen, and specific exercise as well, that would be seen as very unorthodox by fitness experts and US wrestlers, right? But all these produce great wrestlers, and definitely the conditioning is a big part of the reason that they're so dominant, enabling to use that amazing technique that they have. On top of that, most families and villages, a lot of percentage of Dagestan lives in rural areas in the mountains, and when they get together they wrestle, right? And when they wrestle, they get better and better, and then they go from maybe wrestling with their family to wrestling at the local village. They win a championships there if they have a competition, then to the area, etc. And it's almost you have to think wrestling is almost like, it's actually exactly like you'd see in America, everyone plays baseball, or in Canada, everyone plays hockey, or in Brazil, everyone plays soccer, football, as you would say, foot soccer, as you say in America. But in Dagestan, everyone wrestles. Okay. Yes, the kids will play soccer and they'll do martial arts, especially MMA with Khabib and Islam. It's very big there, but still wrestling, it's in the blood, And just like Russia, it's generational. Their fathers, their grandfathers, their great grandfathers, they all wrestled. They would settle things from wrestling. They would win. Maybe they'd have a bet, etc. And for honor, etc. And wrestling is in the blood. Another thing is that all these wrestlers, they have heroes that are wrestlers. So let's say you talk about, actually you would see it in the Midwest in the US, and especially nowadays, a lot of the younger wrestlers, like kids in the US, do have wrestling, because wrestling's growing once again, and they have a lot of heroes. But in Dagestan, it's historical. Like the real big one who started was Ali Aliyev. He was like a 5-time world champion. Definitely one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. And then you have also guys who are like who are from Dagestan. Actually, they're Dagestani of Chechen descent. Adam and Buvasar Saitiev. Buvasar Saitiev is my favorite wrestler of all time. 3-time Olympic champ, 6-time world champ. Definitely considered probably the best freestyle wrestler of all time, or in top 1, 2, 3. But most people consider him as the best freestyle of all time. You have Mavlit Batirov, 2-time Olympic champion. You have Murtazaliyev, who's 2-time world champion. You have Abdul Bekov, who's also Olympic champion, 2-time world champion. And as of the recent years, for me, obviously, he wasn't an Olympic champion, but was an amazing wrestler, amazing world champion, was Gadasov. And then, of course, the best, the star of Dagestan at the moment, which is Sadulayev, who's a multiple-time Olympic champion and 4-time world champ. Actually, he's more than 4-time world champion now. So all these kids, see these guys, and these guys are leaders in the community, and they develop the wrestling not only technically, conditioning wise, but socially. It's like cool to be a wrestler. Kids get out of school and they say, man, I'm going to go to wrestling practice because I want to be like Sadulayev. Wow, he's an amazing guy. Now, there is another even more interesting fact that Dagestanis generally compete for Russia, but there's a ton of Dagestanis who are competing for other countries by getting a passport or citizenship, and they compete for the country. So a lot of champions in other countries that you see are actually Dagestanis. People don't know this, but that's how dominant they are. By the way, you do see some sessions as well, going to other countries and competing and winning, right? And we can see definitely where Dagestan in the grappling arts is definitely dominating is within MMA. Okay, you have Khabib and Islam. They're both from Sambo. They have Sambo and judo background, and of course they train with DC and in the States. But they do wrestle, and they wrestled their whole life, just like every Dagestani kid. It's like imagine you're a wrestler in the States and saying, do you know how to play baseball? You're like, of course I know how to play baseball. But you're not a baseball player, but it's in your blood. You know how to hit a ball, you know how to throw to first base, you know how to catch a ball. Same thing in Dagestan with wrestling. It's part of their culture. It's ingrained into the blood and DNA of every Dagestani. And we see it, and we're going to see it dominate for years to come because the system, it's more than a system in Dagestan. It's a culture. Somewhat maybe what we see in Midwest US in some areas, but it's not. And all these things together and their absolute refinement of technique, and there's such an intelligence in their technique. Put that together and the constant development and logical wrestling they do, and you start getting the dominance that you see of Dagestani wrestlers, and the effectiveness can be seen in all competitions. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Once again, I'll say, if you see me doing tics, I have Tourette syndrome, so I'm not high on drugs or something. I can't help it. And I'll say it in every video so people understand. And I really suggest going and checking out Dagestani wrestlers on YouTube, you know, Sadulayev, etc., and enjoy. It's a beautiful type of wrestling. In my opinion, the best wrestling. And take care and have a good day.